Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. If it's your first time here, my name is Emily and I am a travelling entrepreneur and filmmaker, and today I'm going to tell you all about the time that I lived out of a suitcase for almost 1 year. So if you know the story already, as soon as I graduated from university, I moved to Italy to build a life that I loved. I spent a couple of years in Italy, and about a year ago I decided that it was time for me to move on and spread my wings and do a lot of things, including leave the country. So at the end of last year, I packed up my bags. For the last few years, I've tried to adopt more of a minimal lifestyle, but once again, I purged my items and I decided to give the digital nomad lifestyle a try. Now, digital nomadism didn't stick, but what did stick all throughout the year, pretty much up until now, was living out of a bag. Now, I can already see the comments, so before I get into the video, I did not live out of a single suitcase. What I did do was lived out of a variety of different bags, but what was constant throughout most of the year, up until now, was that I was living out of the bags that I had with me. So I thought it would be fun to show you how I did it and how you could do it and make it work too. At the beginning of the year, that was when I first set out to do this experiment, I guess. Like I said, I spent a lot of time purging things. I sorted out the things as well that I wanted to leave at my parents' house while I was out traveling, and I ended up with this setup, which I was pretty happy with. And it was one big suitcase, one little baby suitcase, and a shoulder bag. I actually took a number of bags with me, so the exact setup would change, but this was the kind of smallest package that I could pack everything down into. I think pretty soon after leaving my parents' house, I realised that this was going to be a little bit problematic. My first stop was Portugal. My parents actually live in France, so I've been flying from France to Portugal. It was a small airport, there was a flight at the same time to London, and the person who checked in my bag assumed from my British accent that I was going to London, so my big suitcase did not come to Portugal with me. So that was kind of the first thing that said, maybe you want to think about having even fewer things. The other thing that made me think maybe you don't want to be lugging around 2 suitcases all the time was when I moved into my flat in Lisbon. I remember lugging these suitcases up these little alleyways. I lived in an alleyway. I lived in this really windy quarter, and a taxi couldn't get through. So I was walking and lugging my stuff up this hill because Lisbon's on a hill, and I was so bloody sweaty. I was pretty pleased with the things that I brought with me. I don't think I really felt like I was missing anything. Actually, that's a lie. I was missing slippers, so I bought 2, but the other one's too far away to reach. Maybe let me just break down what I actually bought with me. I've organised the things that I bought with me into 5 categories. This is how I started out in 2018. So first of all, I went ahead and I packed my clothes. I just bought a couple of pairs of jeans and I bought one nice dress. Always good to have a dress. And just lots of layers. Things that you can layer up are really useful. As you can see, I wanted to be able to get as many looks as possible from the jeans with as few items as possible, but that I could layer up. A few jumpers, a few cardigans were always a good idea. And I bought a couple of jackets so I could change up the look even more. Like I said, it's all about layering. Big fluffy scarf is going to keep you nice and warm in winter weather. And I even bought a couple of fancier things too. Pyjamas, obviously. And I bought 2 swimsuits. Why did I do that? My workout gear didn't really see the light of day much until about May, but I still bought that, my sneakers, flats and boots. For toiletries, I bought a couple of reusable travel bottles, and then my sponge bag, as I like to call it, with a variety of makeup, not too much, hairbrush, you know, the essentials. On the topic of toiletries, if you are a lady who menstruates, as I am, then I got myself a little menstrual cup for this year of travelling because I didn't want to always have to carry around tampons in my bag. They were going to fall out and just get lost amongst my stuff, and it's just healthy for the environment and super convenient. Then if you are working while you're on the move, then you want to bring your work stuff. For me, that's cameras, camera accessories, loads of notebooks, and I even decided to bring all my documents with me. Wouldn't recommend that. Now onto the bags. I actually bought a variety of bags because depending on where I'd be going during the day or night, then I wouldn't really want to bring suitcases out with me. travel towel, passport, train pass, sunglasses, suitcase weigher, teddy bear, phone box. Just random wires. There was some random stuff in there towards the end. And that's about it. So like I said, during my time in Lisbon, the only things I really bought were the pair of slippers, which I decided in the end actually were going to replace my flat pair of shoes. I bought a little book as well. I bought a Portuguese book. It's the Portuguese version of The Little Prince because it's a tradition. I buy that book in every language that I learn, and so I've got one in French and Italian, and now I've got a Portuguese one. So I think that the lesson I learned there is when you are staying somewhere for like a month at a time, it's really fine having 2 suitcases. It's a really nice balance, to be honest. But when it comes to lugging them around, when it comes to moving time, it's not super fun. This brings us to the month of February, where I left Portugal. Once again, it was time to move, and I came back to my native UK for a month. Like, this is like Emily meant to be traveling. Actually, I hadn't been back to the UK in a year between living in Italy and then my parents live in France. It was time for me to go back to the UK and do some admin-y things. It was when I was there, because I was staying in my parents' flat that they have in the UK, I thought, okay, it's time to kind of purge again, really work out how I'm going to make this little setup a little bit more sustainable for the times when I'm moving around. So this is where I actually ditched the big suitcase. Just a little side note as well, this big suitcase, this big red one, isn't actually the actual one I took with me. The actual one I took with me broke, and my mum accidentally stole it after I left it in the UK, so we did a little swapsies. It was the same size as this. So as I ditched the suitcase, I ditched a few things with it. Like I said, I left the flat shoes behind because I had my wonderful slippers now. I left behind a couple of books. One thing that I ended up with during January was a load of random I had like a phone box with me. I had like random SIM cards because I've been swapping SIM cards between Italy and Portugal. A couple of items of clothes. Definitely not enough to fill the suitcase, but enough that I could downgrade again. So this brings me to Emily and her bags 2.0. This setup was definitely a lot less efficient than the other setup. It was more efficient because I could carry the stuff around a bit more easily. It wasn't as heavy, but it was just loads of random bags, if I'm honest. But I made it work. I do remember though that when I was moving from the UK at the end of February to my next destination, there were snow flurries all around Northern Europe, and I remember just trying to drag my little suitcase through London, trying to keep all these shoulder bags on me. Memories. But I did make it to my next destination, which was Brussels. My original plan was to stay in Brussels for a month and then continue traveling, but this is where, plans changed a little bit. April and May is where I started to buy a couple of things, and I mean really a couple of tiny things. I bought a couple of bits of camera equipment because I was working as I was traveling, and video was becoming a much heavier part of my business, so I needed to upgrade some gear. So I got this little light, this little audio recorder, and this little autofocuser thing. They seem small, but this stuff adds up. If you're considering living more of a minimalist lifestyle, I'm really not interested in living with as few things as possible, but little decisions like that do add up when you are living out of a suitcase. It's also worth noting that I'm really glad that I took the different bag combos with me, because I was still from Brussels traveling pretty much every month. So like I went to Amsterdam at the end of March, April I went to Portugal again for a little bit, May I headed off to France, and each time I could kind of pack up the things that I needed, so I wasn't always taking every single bag. When I was in Brussels, I was staying at my boyfriend's studio apartment, so this was another reason. Firstly, that's another reason I didn't want to leave. Secondly, that's another reason why I really had to keep the number of things I had down to a minimum. So even though I did have kind of a base at this point, I was still living out of my bags because it was a studio apartment. If you don't know, a studio apartment is basically an apartment that is one room. It's really only meant for one person, at least this one definitely was. Definitely wasn't meant for 2 people, and it was a struggle, I can tell you. Having said that, I did kind of make the decision that I didn't want to leave Brussels, and I was slowly coming to terms with the fact that I was probably going to move there. But in any case, by the time it got to May, it was getting hot outside, and my kind of jumpers and jeans and boots weren't really cutting it anymore. So this was when I went back to France, to my parents' house, and I picked up a few summer clothes, but still literally just what would fit into the little suitcase that I brought with me, alongside the toiletry bag that obviously I had to take with me. I definitely started to get sick of some of my clothes towards the end of the summer. And even towards the end of the winter, I was so sick of wearing the same thing all the time. But having said that, I had fewer decisions to make. I had to do laundry more often. I can see why it definitely works in the long term for some people. I don't ever want to go back to owning just loads of clothes that I can't even sort through and see all of the things that I own. But in late August, I was going on holiday and I did decide that I needed another pair of shoes because I didn't really have any day-to-day sneakers. Just a couple of extra t-shirts. By this point, a lot of the clothes were getting quite old. This is also the time that not only am I going on holiday, but I'm officially moving to Brussels and we're moving into a new flat. So I was like, you know what, it's purge time again. And I did, I got rid of some of the things that I had here with me, which just made it a bit easier to move. I had a little bit more than fit into just that tiny suitcase I had with me. Remember, I don't have my big suitcase with me anymore. When we were packing up the stuff, I packed up my stuff fairly easily. And that brings us to the month of October. So like I said, all through this time, I've just been living out of bags. Yes, I got a couple of things. Yes, I threw a few things away. Once we're in the new apartment, which is where I am now, we decided that it was time that I maybe brought some of my stuff back into my life. There are definitely some things that makes my life a bit easier, like the lights I'm filming this video with, that I wanted here with me. This was when I got on the phone with my mum and I asked if she could send over my suitcase that I had left at my parents' house. I actually left 2 suitcases, but by the time I'd looked at the stuff that was in there on Skype, I was ready to throw away half of it. And once again, I purged, because you just don't need as much stuff as you think you do, especially when you've been away from it for a year. You're like, I don't even remember that existed, so I definitely don't need it in my life. And so with that, I got the rest of my stuff back. My mum sent over one of the bags, and then I was back in the UK at the end of October and I picked up a couple of bits extra, and here we are. I'm no longer living out of a suitcase. When I think about it, all the stuff I've got here now, I probably could fit into, I'd say, 4 big suitcases, apart from some of the oddly shaped stuff, like those lights maybe. But honestly, just one of the things that I learned from the year, and I just continuously learn through my travels and living abroad in different places, is that I don't need as many things as I think I do. Having said that, sometimes I go a little too far the other way and I get rid of something and I'm like, geez, like that made my life easier. It's not about just owning as few things as possible. It's just about being intentional with what you do own and being honest about what you do and don't use. Would I do it again? Maybe, if the situation was right. I have definitely learned a lot about some of the things that I took with me, like my excessive hard drives. Would I recommend it to somebody else? Absolutely, why not? Obviously that's a generalized question. I think it just depends on whether you're the type of person that would enjoy it. Like, why not try it for a month, for a couple of months, just see what you actually use on a day-to-day basis. I think it's a fun exercise. Fun might be stretching it, but it's a really interesting exercise, and I think that the long-term benefits definitely outweigh the short-term inconveniences. And if you're not going traveling like I did, this is something you can do in your own home. Put the stuff you don't think that you need in the attic or under your bed, and just see where you are at the end of a month or 2 months and what you really used and what you didn't use. I can definitely think of a few ways I could have made the year easier on myself, but hindsight is 2020. So I think I'm going to leave the video there for today. I hope that you enjoyed seeing how I lived out of a suitcase for a year. Maybe you picked up some tips on how you can do the same thing. What do you think that you would really miss if you had to live out of a suitcase for a year? Let me know in the comments. I think another thing I kind of missed is just having a base that's actually mine. Now I can start to put things up. This is very temporary, but I want to make it look nice. And are any of you planning on living out of a suitcase or even a backpack or something for a year? Let me know what crazy things you're planning on doing in the comments. So if you did enjoy this, please do subscribe. I make videos every other week all about living abroad, being a traveler, being an entrepreneur. Okay guys, I'll see you next week in my next video. Bye!